Welcome back to the channel. Dr. Vinay Prasad here, professor of epidemiology and biostatistics at the University of California, San Francisco, and a practicing hem-onc doctor. I need to do a video sometime in the future about that promotion. I've been meaning to, but yes, it's official. I'm promoted to full professor. But that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about an essay I've written for one of my favorite Substacks, Common Sense by Bari Weiss, something that you gotta follow. This essay is entitled, Let Djokovic Play. It's about the saga of Novak Djokovic, who's not allowed to compete in this year's US Open, and what that tells you more broadly about public health, about the White House, about the rules that we're all still under. So let me talk about this essay. Let Djokovic Play. There are a few facts you need to know. Number one, Djokovic is vying for GOAT. He's vying for greatest of all times against Rafael Nadal, against Roger Federer. And of course, you know, I don't want to get involved here, admittedly a Federer fan, but they all are doing quite well. Djokovic's got 21 majors under his belt. I think Nadal's got 22. Federer has 20. They are all, great tennis players, and they're vying for who's the best ever. But those competition will always have an asterisk because Djokovic is not allowed to play in this year's US Open. He's not allowed to play it in some other tournaments along the way. Why? Well, the root of it is he's chosen to be unvaccinated. Okay, that's one thing. He's chosen to be unvaccinated. He's a 35-year-old, as far as I can tell, extremely healthy individual. He's probably one of the most healthy 35-year-olds globally. I mean, he's playing an elite sport, an elite level. He has chosen not to be vaccinated. Another fact about him, as of 2022, he's had COVID twice. I think there's 2 documented instances where he has had the virus, SARS-CoV-2. And the other interesting thing about this saga is he actually played in last year's US Open. He was there. He made it to the finals. He played last year, but this year, he's not allowed to play. Okay, what the hell is going on? Well, there's a rule, and it's set by the Biden administration, and it says that if you're an unvaccinated U.S. citizen, you're free to go. You're free to come, you're free to go in and out of the country. Vaccinated people can come and go in and out of the country, but if you're an unvaccinated non-U.S. citizen, well, you're not allowed to come to this country unless you have a special exemption. As far as I can tell, most of those special exemptions are other politicians. But Novak Djokovic falls under that category. He's a non-U.S. citizen. He's unvaccinated, not allowed to come into this country. And thus, he's not allowed to compete in this year's U.S. Open. But let me tell you how absurd it is. Last year, the rule didn't exist. He was free to come. He played. And this year, at this year's U.S. Open, you're allowed to attend the U.S. Open, vaccinated or unvaccinated, masked or unmasked. You can do whatever you want. There's no rule. You can come freely to the U.S. Open. You don't have to test. There'll be people in the U.S. Open who definitely have SARS-CoV-2. It might even spread at the U.S. Open. But one person who won't be spreading it is Novak Djokovic. This policy really makes no sense at all. Why are we banning unvaccinated non-U.S. citizens from coming and contributing to tourism and the economy of this country? What do we gain by it? We're not slowing the spread of SARS-CoV-2. I don't know if you know this, but let me tell you a little secret. SARS-CoV-2 is already in this country. It's already in this country. It's already spreading. If you built a wall around this country, SARS-CoV-2 would spread for 1,000 years. If you blocked all the Novak Djokovic's of the world, SARS-CoV-2 is still going to spread in this country. It's not going to do anything, okay? Since vaccinated people can bring the virus in, you can get all the variants you want in the world. Stopping him is not going to stop any variants, okay? And the president who set this policy is somebody who's been quadruple vaccinated, who's had COVID twice and took Paxlovid twice, okay? That's the president setting this policy. What are we doing here? What do we hope to accomplish by these rules? And that's the crux of the essay. There are 2 things, I think, that lead to trust in public health. One, the rules have to be consistent. They can't be internally contradictory. You can't block someone from coming here and then let every unvaccinated person in, no mask, no test requirement, doesn't matter, That's a contradictory rule. And the next part of the rules is the rules have to actually promote the greater good. Blocking this guy promotes no greater good. We have the virus in this country. It's already spreading. Vaccinated people can spread it. When vaccinated people and unvaccinated people both have the virus, a New England Journal of Medicine paper shows that the nasal carriage, the nasal culturability, the nasal PCR is actually rather comparable. It has a comparable time course. We can't say with the current variants that vaccination blocks or halts transmission. It's hard to even know if it even puts a damper on transmission. It has a short-term effect each booster after each booster, but that effect diminishes over time, and vaccine effectiveness against any infection goes pretty close to 0 with a little bit more follow-up. So we can't say, that we're halting transmission or slowing transmission with enough time. The virus is just going to keep circulating through the human species for as long as we both shall exist, as long as the virus exists, as long as we exist as a species. It's intertwined with us. It's going to be an endemic virus forever. Blocking this tennis player, it's not helpful. The second part of it is, are we even helping him? This guy has had COVID twice. What value does it have for a 35-year-old person who's recovered from COVID twice to get a vaccine to an old ancestral Wuhan strain, which is all that's available right now? We don't have the bispecific booster, and we don't even know if this new bivalent booster is going to be better. But he's had COVID twice. He's 35. He's probably one of the people in the world who's in the best physical shape. His risk of a bad outcome were he to get COVID-19 a third time got to be as low as it comes, some of the lowest risks in this country. Arguably, it's even lower than the president, who's much older, who's gotten 4 doses. The risk to Djokovic is super, super low. So this policy doesn't protect unvaccinated foreigners. It doesn't protect American citizens. It doesn't make sense. It's internally inconsistent. It's set by the White House in a way that really is sort of almost an abuse of power, because you want to use public health power sparingly so people believe in it, so that the rules you institute make sense and are consistent. And I guess I was lucky to be able to write about this for Common Sense. And I fleshed out my thoughts that barring the tennis player Novak Djokovic has nothing to do with science or public health. Now, some people write back, well, he's a selfish guy, he's a rich guy, he just doesn't want to comply. And look, at the end of the day, if you were to ask me, if Novak Djokovic came and asked me, in early 2021, if he hadn't yet had COVID, maybe he was 34, 33 at the time, should I get vaccinated? I would say that, yeah, based on the Pfizer-Moderna study, based on the skewed imbalance in both severe disease as well as the clear imbalance in symptomatic SARS-CoV-2, it makes sense, I think somebody your age with your risk, with a non-trivial risk based on circulating strains at the time, that you ought to get vaccinated. Would I think he should be mandated to? No, I never said that. I was always critical of the mandates. I knew that they could be misguided. There were a lot of unknown unknowns, and one of those things was the variant escaping. Unknown unknowns, why you would want to be reluctant to do such a thing, and I was always opposed to it. You can read my essays against vaccine passports, against strong-arm tactics on MedPage Today, etc. That's what I told him back then. But in this current moment, can anyone honestly tell him that having had and recovered from COVID-19 twice, being 35 years old and in perfect health, that he will derive an additional health benefit by getting vaccinated for the original ancestral Wuhan strain? And the answer is we just don't know. I don't think there's any credible evidence that would show that that's the case. And so you can't have this policy in his own best interests. And let me put this as an aside. The role of public health is to wisely use power to promote the interests of other people, not somebody's personal choice and personal interest. I think people are allowed to make personal health choices that you may disagree with. That's okay. But if those choices start to interfere with other people's health, then maybe you might have a case. You might have a case to do something about it. Doesn't necessarily mean you have a case, because you have to think about the pros and cons of your action. But this fails. This fails because this mandate does not further reduce the risk to other people. I don't know if you know this. The virus is already in this country. Okay, and I don't know if you know this. Anybody can get the virus, vaccinated or unvaccinated. No one Novak Djokovic, not going to change anything. And what it does look like is like the petty abuse of power. And, maybe he should have made a different choice in the past, but that's frankly not our business. Our business is to set policy that's fair, that makes sense. And this policy don't make sense right now. And it wasn't there last year when he played. So you put all this together and it's really, really bad. I think it's bad. I think it's indefensible. I've never seen anyone say that a policy makes sense. Even the people who may be critical of Novak, they don't think it makes sense. But beyond that, the real implication is that no one will trust public health anymore. People keep lamenting the loss of trust in public health. We see, polio in the sewage water in some cities that might be related to a decline in polio vaccination that occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic, both because, people didn't prioritize going to the doctor. Doctors would have been reluctant to see people in person, as well as there may be some spillover vaccine hesitancy from the relentless juggernaut push to vaccinate kids who've mostly already had COVID with the COVID-19 vaccine. All these things may be coalescing into this. But why has that distrust in public health declined? And people always look at Joe Rogan. I always hear people say, well, it's Joe Rogan. It's that, it's that person over there, and they're on, why are they allowed to be on the dark corners of Facebook or Twitter or whatever, or, preaching their gospel? They're the problem. Well, isn't it possible that one problem is that the institutions in which you want us to trust are making nakedly contradictory and hypocritical decisions? Isn't that a problem? Isn't it a problem that it actually doesn't make a lick of sense what you're doing with Novak Djokovic? Isn't it a problem that it looks like the abuse of power, that it's irrational, that every piece of evidence that we have suggests it's a foolish thing to do? Doesn't that contribute to loss of trust? Isn't that problematic? I think you got to look in the mirror before you blame other people. And if you are doing a bad job, and by the way, they are doing a bad job, a lousy job, and I have been pointing it out in many, many op-eds and many, many more to come, because I keep finding more things that they have done. And I remember things, and I'm working on some stuff. But what's my point here? Why am I trying to point these out to them? It's not too late. You can have a clean slate, okay? You can have a clean slate. And what's the clean slate is? Admit what you know, admit what you don't know. When you don't know, run a cluster randomized controlled trial. Run a controlled study if you don't know the answer. When there are new medical products that you want to debut, like your bivalent vaccine, don't just approve it based on mouse data, which is what is about to happen in the next couple of weeks. It's what every news outlet is reporting will happen. It's what the White House czar has said will happen. That's not good enough. That's in part why Gruber and Krauss at the FDA resigned. Instead, ask the company to generate good data. Let me give you another secret. They got the money to do it. They can run a randomized controlled trial. I see Ashish Jha has a nice thread on Paxlovid and how it works at least above 65 and probably above 50. In vaccinated people, Ashish, there's another way, instead of hanging your hat on all these terrible observational studies, which lend me to wonder whether or not, do you know they're terrible or are you not a good scientist? Which one is it? Do you know they're terrible and you're just BSing me, or you're not a good scientist? Because it's got to be one or the other. Instead of that, you have the regulatory power to make Pfizer do the randomized controlled trial. They're doing it, Paramount, in the United Kingdom. We're going to get some answer. If it's the answer you like, good. It'll save you. But if the answer you don't like, it's going to be really bad for you, and the trust is going to diminish even further. You should demand randomized controlled trials for this bivalent booster. You should demand randomized controlled trials of adequate sample size for kids' vaccines. You need to demand randomized controlled trials that include kids who've mostly had COVID, not kids who mostly not had COVID, because right now the facts on the ground are kids have mostly had COVID, and Paxlovid randomized trials have to be mostly in people who are vaccinated, because those are the facts on the ground. You can't hang your hat on Epic HR. These are simple principles, okay? Say what you know, say what you don't know, and demand good evidence. They are totally failing on the good evidence part, and it just so happens that the more you fail on the good evidence part, the more you build profits for particular for-profit entities. And that has got to be troubling in a political way, that really rich companies get richer the more you lower the regulatory hurdles and regulatory bars. And when you pair all that with just plain stupid policies, and the Djokovic policy is just plain stupid, you pair all that together and you really have an impending hurricane that no one will trust you. And of course they shouldn't trust you, because you are squandering the trust in many ways. You're squandering it in so many ways. These policies for Djokovic, they don't make a lick of sense. Read my essay on common sense. I think it's really good. And read Common Sense. I think it's a great Substack. Read Sensible Medicine. That's the one we're running. And if you like this video, like, subscribe, comment, leave a message below. I've got a lot of other videos to do in the future. I keep talking about the things I'm supposed to do. I will do them the more I get some time. But I'm working on some longer piece articles that I think will further push on this issue of trust and trustworthiness and doing things that make sense. So, like, subscribe, comment, leave a message below. Until next time.